And you're live.
Okay, I'm going to welcome everybody to this workshop for the Wenatchee School Board. And today we are going to be discussing strategic priorities. Right?
Right off our vision work. But I know, Michelle, you wanted to kick us off with just a quick reminder to the board.
Yeah, so I know we all have these legislative priorities with the General Assembly coming up on Friday. Just a reminder, the list that was sent to us was last year's legislative priorities, which I think is really helpful, but there are some new proposals that are in the digital handbook, and I would suggest that you just kind of take a quick look at that if you only looked at the list, because there are some that apply to districts such as ours that have had issues with one of them is digital equity, they call. And there's also another proposal titled Ubiquitous, Affordable, High-Speed Internet. So anyway, there's a number of COVID-related / online learning topics that we may want to consider before we submit our list. Again, they were not on last year's list. So I would just suggest that you just take a look at that notebook or the handbook that is on the WSD website and just review. And it gives descriptions for each of those things that you prioritize. So some things have been amended and revised a little bit. So, and then what WSD will do is after the General Assembly, they'll say which ones passed, which one didn't. Most of them usually pass, but just keep in mind that there are some COVID-19 ones related that you may want to put in your priorities, because I think a number of them could be very applicable to our district. So I just wanted to throw that in there. So thank you.
Thank you, Michelle.
Yeah, thank you. All right, board, I'm gonna share my screen for a little bit. And hopefully everybody can see my Google Doc board vision workshop. And up top, it's the agenda. We're gonna quickly go over purpose, non-purpose, the roles and responsibilities. The heavy lift for today is the vision work, and then we'll conclude with next steps. The piece that we will focus on for our purpose is really to be collaborative, and I want us to kind of lean back in for those who are, well, both boards did the work on the values. So it'll be very similar in nature to that work, where quite honestly, staff is going to be a little bit more quiet, and it's going to be an opportunity for the board to really talk about the different characteristics and the ideas there. So it's really this collaborative effort that the board is going to have conversations, recognizing it is different via Zoom than it is when we were, doing the values, where we were able to look at each other and just really talk through different concepts. But that's a piece that I kind of want you to keep in mind, that work that we did, because it was so powerful and really important work, and led to some incredible values for the district. And then we're going to review and understand the roles of the different stakeholder groups. I'll give you a quick overview, and then Diana is going to jump in with a visual and kind of talk about the different groups and how the board interacts with all the different components of the strategy or of the visioning process. And then we're going to get into the work, discuss and generate ideas, concept, themes connected to the 5 characteristics of a vision. And then the non-purpose is to write the vision statement today. It really is this idea generation, this kind of concepts and themes, and really trying to have the board talk through what connects with them. Diana and I were talking because she's going to be co-facilitating with me today. That idea of why did you want to come to the board? What are those bigger ideals? Not maybe a very specific piece, but kind of those larger ideals for why and what and where you want this district to be, even beyond your time here. I'm hopeful that the board, the community, all the stakeholders really draft a vision that is long beyond our days here, and that really is timeless. I mean, that's when we know we have a really great vision, is when it's not changing every time a board changes or superintendent or those things, that it just speaks to who the district is. So that's what we're hopeful to do. So I'm going to talk about the different roles and their role and responsibility in each, and starting with the board. The boards, you really, at the end of the day, you're going to set the values, the vision, that mission, that purpose, and then the strategic priorities. It'd be similar. Again, I want us to think back long ago when we did the values, where the board took 2, maybe 3 meetings, I think it was, to really coalesce around some different ideas. But it took time for the board to really think through. And it was, as I said earlier, it was just some really important time for the board to talk to each other about what were those values that were personal to you, and then eventually coming to an ideas that the board coalesced around, and then us pushing it out to the community, the different stakeholders, for feedback on. So that's going to be a process we're going to use quite a bit, a real feedback loop. So the values is kind of that check. We've done that one. We're working right now on the vision. And again, it's going to be a similar process. We'll then go into the mission or the purpose statement, kind of the why do we open our doors every day? And then the board will do strategic priorities. So these are these next 3 things we need to be working on, with a focus today and probably the next next workshop. And thereafter we'll be doing the vision, and then we'll pick up next with the mission, and then right after that, strategic priorities. So the board has a lot of work going on just on the strategic plan, because these are yours. What the cabinet will do, once the board has set the strategic priorities, is really start working kind of on a draft plan that would address the board's strategic priorities. And then that would be given to the strategic planning team committee, and it would be a group of stakeholders. And Diana will go into that in a little bit more detail. And then it pushed out into the staff for more feedback. And they'll also have some representation on the strategic planning committee, and then out to the larger community. So we really want to be very thoughtful about our feedback loops. And the board is integral in every one of the feedback loops. The board is that sounding board. When we get some data back, it goes back to the board, and the board really tries to hone in on what is the community, what is that stakeholder group really talking to us about, and narrowing in the conversation, in the wording, and the thoughts, be it a vision, be it the strategic priorities. So each time it comes back to the board to kind of give it its final blessing to move forward. So Diana, I'm going to share this next. I'm going to stop sharing that one, and I'm going to share another one with you, and then Diana will take it from there. Hey, Julie.
You were sharing.
It's weird. Is it there?
No.
Mm-mm.
There it is.
Okay.
Okay, perfect.
You, Diana.
Thank you. Yeah, and Paul just kind of walked you through this. This is the kind of the nexus or the feedback loop of the strategic planning process. And you can really see kind of on both ends, you have the board and your role, as well as the district cabinet leadership. And in between is that feedback loop. So every time we have a piece of this puzzle, whether it be the vision, the values, which we've already gone through, the vision, or the mission, or those strategic priorities, the board will then feed those things through that feedback loop, which includes all of the different groups listed here. That's our public stakeholders, our strategic planning team, and our school staff, to provide feedback on those pieces. Then the district cabinet will interpret what we heard from that feedback loop, and then bring it back to the board. So it's a continuous loop process of feedback and kind of back and forth so that we can really begin to galvanize some of these different chunks of our strategic plan, and everyone's had a chance to provide their lens and feedback on each one of those as we go through. So we wanted to create a visual for you just to see what that looked like, that this is a continuous process. Paul?
Yeah, Diana, you know, on that strategic planning team, because of the world we're living in with everything being Zoom, we thought, okay, bigger initially, and then we were like, okay, how hard is it to run have a strategic planning committee with more than 12, maybe 15 people on it, and it's why we kind of honed in on this 12 number. And what we would ask is board members, if you would send us in, you know, if you're thinking of somebody that we would like to invite, or that if you reach out to them and ask them to invite, because we are thinking somewhere in that early October that we would start that process. If Diana, you want to talk a little bit more about that process.
Yes. So the strategic planning committee, or strategic planning team as we're calling it, will be made up of representatives from a variety of different stakeholder groups, parents, community partners, staff, and students, as well as a representative from our administrative team will make up that team. We will invite people to apply for that. It will be just basically throw your hat in the ring, say that you're interested in participating. And then superintendent will choose who those representatives are. And that group will meet monthly, if not more, to be able to serve again in that role of providing feedback. We will make sure that that application is available and accessible on the website, as well as in other means, similar to what we've done in the past with other committees. So we'll make sure that that's available and well promoted, so people are aware of the opportunity to serve on that committee. But that'll be a commitment. So through the duration of the entire strategic plan, that's going to be an important group that would be representative of our broader stakeholder groups.
Board, any question on the feedback loops before we jump into the meat of our afternoon?
Well, I have a question about the strategic planning team. How would that look like demographically to get representatives from different socioeconomic levels, ethnicities, et cetera? How would that be?
We really want it to be very representative. So we'd be reaching out to different groups to advocate for them to reach out to their colleagues, their peers to submit. Yeah, we want to make sure we have a broad spectrum. And why ultimately we want to look at everybody who applies. And if we don't have a representation, we're going to try to push back out into our community to get that type of representation. As a strategic plan, it has to represent our entire community and not a subset of the community. So that was kind of one of the first lenses that Diane and I used to think this thing through, from a business, from a large business, small business owner, just different ways of incorporating our community and getting their voice into this process. So yeah, and why we're gonna be a little flexible on that 12 number. Is it 12? Is it 13? Is it 15? We're not sure, but we know it's not gonna be 25, 30 to 50 people. So it's just that tightness of it, and where does it land within our community? But we will, and that's why we're asking our board to really reach out to those who you think would be a good representation on this committee, because you know our community much better than I do. And this is a good role for all of you to take up on and say, hey, you know, I think of Martin from the business community, or is there somebody, Laura from the business community, or small business, large, that would do that, from all these different representative groups that are out there. Must be a part of this. Great question.
Thank you.
I would say too, it's, you know, I hate to use the word application. It
Yeah.
really is just filling out a form saying, hey, I want to participate, and casting a broad net so that we can make sure people feel included in the process and invited to be part of the process. And then, like Paul said, we will then evaluate those to make sure that we ultimately have a good representative group of those 12 core individuals to serve on that team.
Yeah, we don't want to put any barriers in the way of anybody. And yet I'm glad you said that, Diana. Application makes it sound like
Yeah.
you're trying to
And we'll
get
go away
it
from
into
that term.
something really exclusive. I mean, are you willing to give time? Because that's going to be a big one. And you're consistently going to be there and be a voice for not just who you're representing, but seeing the bigger community as well. And that's a tough one sometimes to go small to big picture and big to small again.
So I just had a follow-up question with that. So you said monthly meetings, and you're thinking how long for those participants?
Oh, until the board looks at us and says we're there. And really, this is going to be driven by the feedback and where are we at, not a predetermined May 12th, we're done. As we know with everything else in COVID, it's hard to put a timeline on anything anymore. But yeah, it really is going to partially be driven by the board, partially be driven by the work that the teams are doing. But I anticipate that once the board feels comfortable with it, they give us their nod, and then we move forward with the entire community.
Thank you.
All right, I'm going to stop sharing that screen and come back to the screen over here. I sent out some a chapter, Simon Sinek's book. It's one of those books that just really resonates with me from a leadership perspective, and I really appreciated his perspective on the visioning work that he's done and really trying to break it down. And I liked how specific he was around each of the 5 components. And really what we're looking for is that long-term, and I like this piece up at the top, capturing the words, the stories, and examples for each of the 5 characteristics of a vision. Thinking of a vision like an iceberg, all we ever see is the tip of the iceberg, the things we have already accomplished. No matter how much of the iceberg we can see, our leaders have the responsibility, us, to remind us that the vast majority still lies unexplored. For no matter how much success we may have enjoyed, the vision of which we are working lies ahead and not behind us. And that, for me, is really where we want to be, is moving forward and being able to do this work. So now you're going to hear a lot less of Diana and I, and a whole lot of the board. And really what we want to do is go through each one of these things, the for something, inclusive, service-oriented, resilient, and idealistic. And really what we're asking for the board is your thoughts on each one, and really having those questions and pushing each board member as we talk about each of these different areas. And then we're capturing that work on the back end. Like we did with the values, we would then bring this back to the board at our next workshop, and the board would then start kind of honing those terms in and really trying to grapple with that vision that they see that is needed for our school district and our community and our students. Does that sound like a good pathway forward for all of us? All right. Hearing no objection. So let's start in with for something. This is that being affirmative, this optimistic. Being for something is about feeling inspired. Being for ignites the human spirit and fills us with hope and optimism. Being for focus our attention on the unbuilt future in the order to spark our imaginations. So what are those pieces that we're for, that affirmative, that optimistic? And those, again, we're looking for words, phrases, stories. I think too often we forget how important stories are and how they really do impact us and where we're at. And those stories could be situations that you've encountered in your past or as a board member. So I will be quiet and hand it over to the board for whomever wants to start in this area for something.
Okay, I guess I'll try. So being for something, I am for developing a community where everyone can be successful. I'm for helping to develop a community where innovation is widely experienced, that we have opportunities abound for our students who want to be successful and thrive, be giving back to the community, and they don't necessarily have to leave our community to experience those things.
That's the way to kick it off.
We didn't plant you, we swear.
I know.
Next job, Laura.
Okay, maybe I'm going to talk for a while and be less constructive. I think there should be a sixth item, and I can go very quickly. I think that beginning with the just cause is an excellent way to go. And I have absolutely no questions about the 5 criteria, but they are criteria. They're not pathways, they're not goals, and they're not a plan. So I think we do need to start from this point. When we talk about a vision, different sources, you talk about being infinite. It's incompletely describable, definable, imaginable. It's never ending. We're going to have to add, change, do great things, be flexible. All of those things are true. And something else I read, it talked about that being beyond goals. But here I'm being a bit square-headed, an engineer, an economist. I don't think we want to have wishful thinking attitudes at the heart. The most painful workday I ever had in my life was when a board chairman decided to make his bold, audacious goals, vision, wordsmithing a substitute for a strategic plan. So in fact, I'm going to go on a little bit further because I think I want to set the way we're going or what I think about it right up front. So I'm wounded and prejudiced. Let's make a joke about that. But I think that as you start with vision and these attributes, you've got to be able to see how that links directly with complete matrices of planning that have got goals versus resources that evaluate the environment, that the projects and programs that go on for a long time. To me, we've got to get down I'm going to do it with an analogy. This is what the school district is. We're building 7,000 vehicles for life. Each vehicle takes 13 years to construct, and each vehicle needs a useful lifetime of 50 years. What's going to matter? Is it the powertrain and the information system that each vehicle gets, or is it the package we put it into? And that's why I wasn't sure when to say this, but I think we need to really worry about, or at least be concerned about further forward into the hard content of a strategic plan, and that will accelerate and focus us on the other aspects. So, from a personal point of view, I would like to leapfrog over putting more nice words on these 5 attributes and start thinking about using the whole team and the process. I'll shut up at that point.
So to hopefully alleviate some of your fears, Martin, that will be coming up. That's part of those strategic priorities. What does the board from the big picture want to be focused on, and just throwing out like a finance, academics, those types of pieces, and that layering in. But I truly believe that a district needs a vision that holds us accountable to where we're going all the time. And it has that future focus with, and even Simon talks about it in his book, is then you have goals that align to that vision. It's not just the fluff of the words, but it's the direction in which this organization wants to go and wants to be held accountable to. I think a vision is one of those pieces that we should be held accountable to, and it should be seen within the plan itself. You should see components that say, oh, I see how you're going to become that through this plan. And that it's just the big picture. I like holding on to the big idea, and that's really what a vision is that big idea of what we're trying to do. But there definitely needs to be some details that will be coming.
So I'm going to throw my hat in and just say that I see our duty with education as about more than just learning specific classes like on math and reading and writing, etc., but that we are creating the citizens of tomorrow, and that as citizens of tomorrow, they should be thinking of their fellow man, and they should be, much as we want to be an equitable district in our educating of our students, I would hope that our students would go forward and think of equity and inclusion in their daily lives. Also, I think communication, learning those skills, both vocal communication and written communication, have to be those soft skills we know are so important. But those are, I think, important no matter what technology is doing. You know, if a nuclear bomb went off today and we didn't have technology, we would still need to be able to communicate verbally and hopefully written in some form. So those are the things that resonate with me moving forward, is that I want us to, much like Martin's example with the car, I would replace vehicle with citizen, that we are creating the citizens of tomorrow, and that we want them to know about the world around them, to know about the rights that they have, and advocating for equity for all, just like we are advocating for equity in their education for all of our students. So those are my thoughts for now.
And I'm going to leap in quickly. I like the Citizens for Tomorrow, Michelle, because for me, it kind of bridges the hard and the soft that I was worried about. And it is something, but to be a citizen for tomorrow, you can probably pin 20 different attributes on and 30 different skills, but at least that's better than saying I'm being a nice person. You know, and you can then link that a little harder. You know, I'm looking at that as citizen. You know, if we're citizens for tomorrow, we want citizens to be inclusive. We want them to be service oriented. We want them to be resilient, and we want them to be idealistic. So it links to 4 of those 5 deals. And so, yeah, if we can reach for things like that, but at the back of our mind to realize that it's going to go to an attribute, it's going to go to a program, and if all the rest of you are far more brilliant like Michelle and come up with phrases like that, then that'll be constructive. Thanks.
Maria, Julie?
I have thoughts. I'm just not sure. This type of planning is a stretch for me, because I can see in my mind what I want, but I struggle to articulate it. And then tracking with what everyone else is saying, it's a little easier for me to see some ideas out there and figure out where I gravitate to, because of, you know, of course, I don't want to be too far off the mark. You know, I I like the car analogy, to be quite honest, because for me, it's a little bit more concrete. But it is, you know, I want, you know, my goal is that we, you know, give students opportunities, you know, arm them with the tools to be the good citizens, to make the decisions, to decide what equity, inclusion, all those things mean to them. I sometimes wonder too much that we're imposing our will on what it means to us versus giving them the tools to think about what it means to everybody. And so as long as we're kind of on the same page where we want them to have tools to critically think and to be good citizens, you know, to achieve at the highest that each of them can achieve in whatever is important to them, I think it's important to us to give them those opportunities. However that shapes out in this, I'm less clear, but I did agree with the reading that you put out, and that's like how I operate my own business and what I would do, you know, why I chose law versus business. I didn't like to be told what to do. I liked the tools to be able to move forward, to change with times, to question the whys, to just be a little more progressive like that. So
That's
I don't know.
fantastic.
For me, I struggle to keep all of the ideas together. I know everyone's got great ideas. I just don't know where they all fit at this point. This being my first time going through this. I'm
there
sitting
is no
back a
place
little
for
bit.
them to fit. So
I know.
just as a reminder, this is meant to be a messy process. Yep. You don't have to fit into any category. This is when you think of the future of Wenatchee schools, what do you see? What are words or stories? You did a great job sharing about your law practice because that's relevant to you. So there is no right answer here. It's all about what do you see? And we're not trying to craft the vision statement today. This is all about sharing what we see in each one of these and brainstorming and just having dialogue. So every answer is totally, you know, put it out there. What's in your brain space right now? There's no right answer. There's no wrong answer. It's just a chance for everybody to hear in each one of these different 5 categories. So keep going.
Yeah. Amen.
I appreciate that.
Go
Diana.
for it, Maria.
I appreciate that, Diana and Julie, because I'm with you, Julie. I mean, I agree with all the points that Laura, Martin, and Michelle made. And to my analogy is, okay, this is like a math problem. You know, we know the answer, we know what we need, we know what that, we might identify what that something is, but how did we get there? So, you know, we want innovation, we want to spark our students' imagination, making them feel inspired and whatnot. But I guess, how do we get there? This is a really good read because it's not, you know, it's a cost. It's not just fluffy words. So yeah, I'm nothing specific to add, but just, you know, what work do we do to get there, to get that, those, you know, affirmations, the optimism, the innovation that we need.
So Maria, what would you want for Noah?
The best.
Tell me what the best is. If you were to describe the best for Noah, because I think sometimes we forget, these are about these kids' lives. And what you need to hold me accountable to is making sure that we deliver back to the board of how do we get there. Your role is to hold us high, make us really think and stretch, and then we bring back ideas on how we actually get there. So where would you want Noah? What is that best for Noah?
Well, I think, like Michelle's point, you know, we need to be able, we live in a different world than the world that I grew up in, that, you know, Martin grew up in. And so having those skills of empathy, communication, I think our society is drastically moving away from that. And, you know, I often hear, from educators and parents, well, okay, he's not performing at, you know, high math standards, but he's respectful, he's communicating well, he has empathy for, you know, for others. And so I think that's key, but then we also can't forget the academic piece that, you know, that has to be intertwined. Do I want my child to, you know, be taught by, you know, the best educators, to be teaching to his abilities? It might not be his peers' abilities. So that's where the equity in education comes. Just, you know, one size does not fit all. And I recognize that from my child's perspective. And I know my child is a model of many other children in the district. So, you know, that balance of wanting those soft skills, needing those skills of communication, empathy, but then also the high academic standards that come with it from the best of that Wenatchee School District has.
Love it. Love it.
Can I put in something that comes out of piggybacking on everybody else's comments? A word that, or a vision that came to my mind based on Citizens of Tomorrow is we want all our students to be survivors. Being a citizen of tomorrow is one of the additive positive things. You can say being a survivor is defensive, but it's really, really important, and it relates to lack of equity and disadvantages, which is core part of our job. But the hierarchy that I was thinking about is survivor to me is meaningful, and we can pin stuff on it. And I'll just go down to the bottom of the stairs. One of the things that, you know, I've suggested should be somewhere in a footnote in a plan is financial and consumer education for all students so they can defend themselves. So I would like to, that describes the linkage between hard and soft. I'll tell you something that I don't like. Underneath a survivor is we need innovation. But what is innovation? Where does it come from? It's something nice. It's not really describable. Each of us can have a different innovation, but underneath innovation, we have tools. And now we get to hard education content that can help you be an innovator. And by being an innovator and adapter, you become a survivor. And we'll ask for feedback, but we would like all our students to be able to survive and thrive. So that's kind of a hierarchical way of looking at the process that actually I stole from all of you.
And honestly, that's it right there, is where your work, brings me back to the value conversation that the board had a while back. We just feed off of each other. That's the beauty of this. And that's why I love this opportunity. I love it more if we were all in person, because there is this synergy you get off of each other by thinking these things through, and by us capturing the words and the phrases and the stories to then bring it back to the board to say, these were the pieces that came out. And then you start to, again, tighten that up each time we keep coming back to you. So you're nailing it right now. And I just want to emphasize something Diana said. This is messy and it doesn't feel right. You trust the process, trust your gut. This is really a gut reaction type of process right now. So let's go to this inclusive, this idea. A just cause serves as an invitation to join others in advancing a cause bigger than ourselves. A just cause is a specific vision of a future state that does not exist yet. The words must paint a specific and tangible picture of the kind of impact we'll make, or what exactly a better world will look like. Clear cause is what ignites our passion. So just on that inclusive, open to all those who would like to contribute.
So words that come up for me around inclusion are respectful, tolerant, open to differences. Like, you know, I guess maybe in this climate of today, what I'm seeing that I'm not liking is the opposite of that. Intolerance, lack of openness to new ideas, being willing to understand that diversity in people comes in a lot of different ways. It's the color of our skin, it's the homes we live in, the neighborhoods we live in, the economic experiences that we have, but it's also ideals that people have, sometimes extremely different polarizing ideas about whatever. But I don't think that that should cause us to believe that everybody else needs to be the same. We aren't making cookie cutters. We live in a diverse society, so that inclusion is the appreciation and respect for differences in all the different ways that we are unique.
Well said.
For me, this is more on the surface. For me, as a one of five, you know, my cause, because of my experiences and the way, you know, coming from a monolingual home, it's always in the forefront. To make sure that we're, you know, servicing our Spanish-speaking families, that we're getting the information out in Spanish. And this is where I've really struggled, because I feel like it's something that not so much anymore, and I appreciate that, but it's something that I have to constantly bring up. You know, what are we doing for our Spanish speakers? What are we doing for our families that are not quite there with technology? So this doesn't go as deep, but I often feel like, okay, well, you know, I am the only Latina on the board. It shouldn't just be coming from me. So to have that inclusive concept, you know, it's not as deep as we think it is. It's just, you know, I do appreciate you guys, my colleagues, where it does have come up, but I feel like just because you look a certain way, it doesn't mean that you're the sole responsible person for bringing that. Does that?
True.
It
Yeah,
is.
absolutely.
I wrote down, as I was listening to Maria, I wrote down, we want inclusion to be part of our DNA and not reliant on an individual. So that's how I summarized what you said to me.
Perfect.
And I would add two other characteristics. The way it's written, open to all of those who would like to contribute. I think that two other dimensions that I would see. One is that if we're preparing citizens and survivors, they need to be sensitive and aware of the differences and diversity in all people. And so you actually notice, you don't just invite them if they want to come. And the other one, because people may not come, is you go fetch. So I think inclusive doesn't just mean you welcome everybody who arrives. It means that you're looking laterally to identify the whole world in all the diversity and advantages and disadvantages. And finally, because you're sensitive and aware, you know where to go fetch them and help them over the hurdle. So I would definitely, playing this other game of a more social engineering nature, I would like inclusive to be a lot more broader and deeper and tougher than the way it is there.
I like that. I like that. You don't want to be passive. You want to be active in your inclusion, because we've seen for so long when you're passive, it's like, oh, nobody showed up. And then we do the blame of somebody else because you didn't show up. It's your fault because we opened the door for you and you didn't walk through. So it's your fault. So I think that's a nice way of putting it, Martin. Thank you. What else under inclusive?
So I think about inclusion. Maybe this is so obvious, it's silly to even say, but it goes beyond the walls of our school buildings. I mean, it's
good.
we want our students to feel that way, and out in the broader community and the world, you know, we have people that have strong opinions about various things and viewpoints, because we all are, oh, what's that implicit bias. We've got implicit bias, you know, based on our own experience and how we have lived up until now. So there's a push-pull, which I've seen over time, where some of the students may feel more open to differences, but perhaps their families do not, or perhaps the community does not. So how do we rectify, balance, whatever? Does that make sense at all? I mean,
Yes.
it's kind of a funny place to be.
No,
Children,
I feel
think it's a
like I
really
hear
good
what
place.
you're saying. We want to include everybody, but we don't want to change everybody to be the same. We want to respect differences in opinions. And that's where I struggle with a lot of some of these movements. It's okay to be different and have different ideals, as long as we're respectful of each other and we can critically think through them. And so with this inclusive, it's, yes, I want to look and make sure that we are giving the opportunities to everybody who wants to participate and take them in, but we're not expecting everybody to maybe feel the same way about everything or succeed in the same way. We're going to have to adapt to some of those differences and not deny that they exist and just try and create one, you know, everybody all the same. I think we need to get everybody to the table, but we need to be able to respectfully live together, if that kind of makes sense.
So Laura, I appreciated your comments. I think in terms of the inclusivity, I do see the community as being an important part of that. And I would like not only our schools to kind of have this embracing of equity, but that it would have a spillover effect, you know, that our community would also embrace it. And I think, you know, in terms of our value statements, that was received by the majority as a positive thing, but I would like to see that as, yes, we appreciate that our school wants to be equitable. I would hope that it would be 100% that, yes, you want all children to have that great education, regardless of their background. So that it's a, people can have their own biases and everything, but I think for everybody to buy into, yes, equity is an important facet in our district, I think would be huge for me. So I think that that ties in with that inclusive piece, is that the community is a component of that. And if we're treating our students equitably in terms of giving them the best education, each and every one of them, and giving them the opportunities that hopefully that other businesses would see that as well, that they wouldn't just go with their buddy's best friend's, you know, child, but that they would look to say, oh, you know, maybe there's some other kids who could use that opportunity that I don't know, or whatever. I don't know. I'm just saying, I think the community is an important part of that. And I think that's what we're saying, is that we want that just cause to be an invitation for the community to embrace our values and our just cause, so they are on board and they are coming and saying, yes, how can I help? How can I be a part of your vision? So
many different ways to look at that topic. Like while you were speaking, a thought just came to me, like, I am disturbed when I hear people say things that make me feel like public schools are a threat to a family's values, whatever, wherever and whatever they are. Does that make sense? Like schools should be a safe place regardless of what your values are politically, your family values. And it goes both ways. I don't want to make everything political, but we do have the spectrum of you know, conservatism and liberalism, and because that's at the forefront of our minds right now with everything that we do. Schools are also becoming politicized, and I just cringe at the idea that people feel like we are providing an education that has a political undertone to it, that families feel threatened in some way. And this is looking at it totally, this is not the big visionary viewpoint, but it's kind of talking about some negative undertones that I have heard over time.
I mean, and I can echo that too. And so with our inclusion piece, I think it's important that we reach out and we have all those differing backgrounds together and make that a very important piece. But then I think part of our mission is then to, you know, teach each other to respect your differences and be tolerant and whatever, not to fully change a particular mindset. Because I know, and especially during these political times, yeah, it does kind of get a concern because your kid comes home going, so-and-so shouldn't win and so-and-so shouldn't win. And I kind of go, how did you hear that? But it's giving them, part of our maybe academic mission is teaching them, you know, how to be scholars and to read for themselves, to think for themselves, to do things, to appreciate somebody else's diversity and give them skills to have conversations. You know, not, you know, just those are the kinds of things that I would like, because I want to bring everybody to the table and then have opportunities to respect that some individuals learn differently. We have programs and options for that. Some, you know, maybe some folks want more rigorous work. We have programs and options for that, but that we're bringing everybody together, but we're not all treating them it's hard to say that without sounding bad. We're not all treating them the same, but we're treating them with what works maybe for them or for their family, if they've got the time and resources in some ways, which it sounds a little more divisive than I mean for it to be, but it's I want everybody together and I want to arm them with the tools to have conversations, respect each other's diversity, learn how to live in a society where we don't all look, think, see the same way, come from the same backgrounds, and be, you know, tolerant and, you know, fight for those who are having injustices and you know, just understanding appropriate ways to engage in some way.
Mm-hmm. As an educational system, how do we bring that? I mean, you know, it's not just telling kids to be inclusive. I think we, you know, if we talk about the academic piece, it's like, well, what does this mean? Does this mean we introduce, you know, Latin American studies at the middle school level, African American literature? I mean, how do we make it tangible and how to where we are teaching our kids this? I mean, do we have an ethics course? Do we, you know, this is where I struggle. I mean, again, you know, yeah. How does it work? How does it play out?
I love it.
That's the beauty of a strategic plan, is that is the way we will build that together. So what do we want it to be?
Well, you know, oftentimes kids, I grew up in a predominantly white community, and it wasn't until I was in college where I was exposed to different cultures, different races outside of my home. And so, you know, do we start that at a much younger age so that there isn't that much of a culture shock? You know, kids brains are still forming at the elementary, middle school, high school level, to where, okay, we need to create tolerant, inclusive kids. How do we go about that? What does it mean within our educational system? Because we want everybody to be inclusive. We want everybody to be just and kind and make an impact in the world. Absolutely. But how do we get there?
Now, you're all tiptoeing on something that I didn't even think about before this. And the words I would use is where are we on respecting, tolerating, or allowing dissent of any kind? So the one side of it is to respect and include and be aware of all our differences. I don't know if anybody else has been through, it used to be a popular team building technique. You put one person in a group who took an absolutely outrageous position, asked them to come back with a decision, and not infrequently they would come back and they would say they were unanimous because they'd amputated the outlier. And it was to teach you not to do that. But so we have dissent of all kinds, which may be factual or non-factual, and I don't know how you would include that right now in strategic planning. But I think you would definitely want to recognize it. Maybe that's where you have to stop in strategic planning, because you cannot create a template for handling it perfectly, because one person's belief is another person's propaganda. Anyway,
Well, I think of some good examples of that, and maybe this isn't what we want to do in strategic planning, but you think about our kiddos who are working in debate, for example, looking at both sides. Those kids are learning to dialogue, to have respectful conversations, to be critical thinkers, and to back up their statements with information that can be verified. I just kind of think that there's something about that in education that maybe isn't as prominent as it needs to be. It should be limited to the debate folks or the kids that are studying in particular topic areas. Where do we introduce that ability to have respectful dialogue?
And I think part of that comes with just my thought is that comes with the kind of, it's a quality of education component, because you don't have to necessarily tell them you're learning how to do this skill, but when you get build the skills of reading, critical thinking, things like that, you naturally, it's kind of like a jury practice. You don't want to give everybody the answer that this is what we're doing and why we're doing it. But if you build them the skills to do that, they will do it on their own. And they will be much more successful at it, because a good leader can lead people not by telling you, this is what I think, and you're going to go along with it. A good leader is one that understands both sides of the issue and can play the best devil's advocate in some ways, because they can, they can research what is, what the issues are and talk to you more about them. That's the kind of, when I say, I want to bring everybody to the table, but I want to arm everybody with those tools to appreciate things that are different, to have their own viewpoints on various things, and then to, be productive citizens. I mean, I'm not advocating that anyone go and have like a weirdly outlier opinion, and I hope that's not the perception anyone's getting from this. But what I'm trying to say is I think it fits in this building the skills, and they'll get there on their own. We don't have to teach them how to deal with the differences necessarily if we've taught them the foundational skills.
Yeah, I just want to pause you for a second, because I texted Diane. I'm like, holy cow, what a great conversation. I couldn't have asked for a better visioning conversation, because you're putting out these huge ideals. Let's just take this one piece that you guys are just talking about, where you're having this conversation, this dialogue, this debate. and you have the tools to be able to have that type of debate. And Laura, you touched on something beautifully that connects over to equity and inclusion. So who gets to be a part of the debate team? Why aren't all students learning those types of skills? Why aren't we believing that all kids can thrive in an environment where you have to defend, where you have to have your right, Julie? Too often we go, everybody wants to, especially in education, we all want to do these 21st century skills, even though we're midway through, and we're still calling them 21st century skills, are these critical thinking, all of these beautiful things. But you have to have foundational concept knowledge first before you can critically think. And so what you are talking about is really setting these ideals up here that we want this for students. And what you're also giving is for cabinet and staff members to be driving a plan that meets these ideals, that say, why is debate only here? Or are we doing project-based or problem-based learning only at a high school level? And by that time, it's only for a select few students. And why aren't all students involved in that type of conversation? And who said this? I like this one piece here, to question the whys. Why aren't we teaching first graders and second graders, and it's a different level of complexity when you're talking about an AP student questioning the whys, but all of our students should be equipped with, and I like the term that those tools to have that conversation. And as an educator, one of the things that I believe is most powerful in education is when a child can actually transfer that knowledge into a new and unique situation and use that skill differently than how I taught you how to use that skill. To me, that's when we're like knocking it out of the ballpark. But you guys are like nailing it on the vision piece, because you're really painting what you want for students. And then what will, one of those next steps along the way will be coming back to you on multiple occasions on the how do we get there. So keep going. Anything else on inclusion?
Can I just say that Julie threw us a lifeline maybe on this question of dissent by linking it to law, justice, in a sense, the Constitution. These are aspects of citizen preparedness. And so maybe for whenever it is, 5 meetings from now, that's not necessarily a whole course, but it's a concept that we would like to include. And I call it a platform or a footnote of the strategic plan, that we would want our education to enable people to handle objectively, and using the model. Here we have a non-political model. We have the Constitution and the justice system as a model for handling dissent in inclusiveness.
Yeah, which sort of ties into the importance of understanding history, because that's a huge part of our democracy. The ideals that really sparked with me are on this conversation are adaptability, resilience, and I don't know if anybody said grit, but grit is an important attribute to me. And I think overall, what I would like for our students to come away with is the ability to face change in a positive way, because our world is changing. And if we as people, our students as people, are expecting that, the way we had it when I was a kid is the way it should be, or, the way I learned it in the school is the way it should be, then we're raising a generation of unhappy people, in my mind, because they will never be able to achieve that ideal world that they think they should be in. So if people are adaptive, change-oriented, and resilient and gritty, that would be a great gift that we could give, I think.
I just wanted to throw in another comment. So a couple of the words that I heard, which for me have meaning, I think Julie was talking about respect of others. And I think that is something that fundamentally gets taught at home. I'm not saying that schools can't teach it or don't teach it, but I think that respect does tie in with tolerance and the word inclusive. I think, in my view, tolerance and inclusivity are on that same spectrum, but they're not at the same point. So to tolerate someone, particularly if they're different or have different views, is one thing. To tolerate someone if they're a different race or different socioeconomic level, I think is what we're talking about when we're talking about inclusion. So I don't know. To me, those are not the same words, and I'm not saying that anybody said they were the same, but I think tolerance means that you're maybe not accepting of the person, that you're just kind of putting up with them. I guess that's kind of the view I have of that word. And so again, we're kind of looking at kind of lofty goals. And I think I want to shoot for inclusivity, and not that we're just tolerating one another, but we can have kids sitting at a variety of different tables and people don't feel left out. It doesn't mean that everybody's going to sit at a mix of tables, but I would hope that if people are paired up in their various classes, that they're not uncomfortable. And to me, that's an inclusive environment, that students feel safe being partnered up with whoever they are with in their classes, regardless of their status, ethnicity, whatever, gender, whatever. So anyway, I just wanted to throw that out, that I think that respect is an important word, but I think that starts at home. So I think to demand respect, because often our rules tie in with if people are not respectful of others or their property, there's usually some kind of discipline that happens, right, in our buildings. And usually that happens at home as well sometimes. So I think I would be careful using that word. I mean, ideally we want people to be respectful of others, right? But I think we just have to think about where that attribute is coming from. So sorry, that was probably very confusing.
You got an idea just like going in my head while you were talking, Michelle. If change is the norm, we're always changing. Tolerance in my mind is important, because sometimes as individuals, and I know this for myself, I'm not accepting of a particular idea, particular person's viewpoint or lifestyle or way of doing whatever. I might be going, oh, please, that's not a right way to be. At a particular point in time, I can be resistant, not understanding of whatever it is that I'm faced with. But I, in my own life, know that I have felt that way about things. Maybe 10 years ago, I felt that way about something. But now I don't feel the same way about that particular thing. And so, but I don't think I damaged any person physically or their property or did anything intentionally to hurt somebody when I wasn't accepting of that. And tolerance is an important attribute in that case, because change is inevitable and we as people change. And in the meantime, while we're seeking to become better people, inclusive in different ways, it's important for every person, our students, I think it's important for us to have tolerance, because you might not think that same thing in the future. And while you're growing, the growth and the mindset, we have that in education and academic achievement. Growth is our mindset, but also in other ways, growth as a mindset, I think, is an important framework, I guess I'll call it that, in my mind.
Thank you, Laura. That was helpful.
Yeah.
Michelle, I don't think I disagree necessarily, but I think there is a place to kind of learn the respect piece in class as well. I think so much of how they become good citizens is based on modeling both at home and at school. And if we, by being inclusive, I completely agree, it's getting everybody of all backgrounds to the table, you know, dividing everybody up so that they're intermingling with one another. But I think that also in itself builds some of this respect component, because if you're constantly interacting with other groups of students, you model respectful behavior, you promote respectful behavior between your students of all different, you know, demographics. So I think there's a place in it. It's not just as much at home, but I agree, a large part of of that dynamic comes from what your background is, or what you see, or what is modeled at home. But it's not to say we can't model it necessarily in the classroom and build on that. So maybe they're taking things home to their parents and saying, hey, I met this really cool kid in class today, can they come over? You know, that may not be someone they're used to seeing at their house, but that, you know, the students can learn from or parents can learn from their students as well. So I think I agree there maybe is two components. Where I was going more was with, I agree we need to get everybody into the table, and then give this, you know, as part of our academic mission, build the skills so that they can over time figure out what their ideas are, how to handle conflicts, what is respectful or not. Kind of what I was thinking.
Really good conversation on that. I appreciated that piece. Martin or Maria, anything that you would add there, or are we good?
Very quickly, not to prolong it forever, I would say at least once a week, if not twice a week, I read a concerned article about divisiveness globally, not just in the United States, and how that's exaggerated by social media and the entire communication network that has taken over. And so if we were to do an environmental assessment of risk and competition and things like that, which is another of the hard things that I think every strategic plan should have, that would probably loom up as being one of the big risks that we face. And then that feeds back into how to live with, manage, and cope with dissent, conflict. And I agree it's family as well. I don't know how far it can be fitted into schools, but I think that's, right now, I just put it on the shelf for us to look at and think about. But it is an environmental assessment, not just a content assessment.
Just quickly, one of the, Martin mentioned survivors in the previous point, and Laura, when he said that, what came to mind was grit. I think it's through those experiences that we develop, through our survivals in life, we develop that grit. And once again, how do we generate that in our students?
I think you're right. I think there's also this understanding of how important failure is, purposeful struggle, and how that truly transforms the brain. And we learn more when we struggle, actually, than when we just keep nailing things perfectly. So there is this body of research from outside of the educational field, from those who study the neurology of our brains and how it's impactful. And there's just a huge amount of evidence as to what happens when we struggle, when we fail, and fail is that growth opportunity, if it's supported in the right way. If we recognize it as educators, that this is an important time, and I can help scaffold a little bit for you to get back on there, because and then you have this really purposeful practice on those areas. So that's an important piece. And I like that tie from survivor to grit, and that kind of that Angela Duckworth kind of work, that growth mindset and those pieces. I like that connection that I didn't make before.
Well, and so you just mentioned that. So, we have, our numbers reflect that we have a huge number of our low social economics, our free reduced lunch. So how do we take these experiences of survival, of challenges, and surround our students with that positive focus, that light, to turn those into, because we all survive different things, but how do we, we go this way or we go this way? And so how do we help our students go up and use that, develop that grid to, change, not necessarily change, but, grow in, whether it's academic or in life.
I think that's the beauty of what your work here is, that it's captured, and that we have to make it come to life in the actual plan itself. And it's really saying, where are we putting our value of? Are we putting our value of the Smarter Balance test? Is that where we're going to put all of our value on when we talk about the matrix, when we talk about the metrics of measuring all of this work? Is that where we're putting the value in and saying, okay, you're only this if you achieve that? Or are we going to measure different things? And to me, that's what measure is, what gets done. It's tried and true. We know it. So when we think this thing through, it can't just be the as Martin said, the fluffy words of a vision. It has to also be connected beautifully with the plan. And then what are those things we're measuring? Because those are the pieces that really tell educators, oh, the board's more worried about this than that. I'm going to spend my time here and not over here. The board may say something cute around respect and dignity and equity, but the only thing they're measuring is this. So it's one of those those are those pieces that all of us have to have that lens on. What are we measuring? And because it's very much like a budget. We can say we want all these really nice things, but this is where we're putting our money towards this thing. And this thing's not being budgeted at all. So that's telling me you don't really care about it. It's a word. It doesn't mean anything. And, I also equated to, used to work with a lot of principals in Colorado, and they would show me all their beautiful vision statements up on their wall. And then I'd go and ask them to show me their master schedule. Their master schedule actually showed me what they valued. And were they willing to compare that beautiful vision to an actual practice of what they're doing on a daily basis with 85% of their budget, which was staff? Where were they putting their staff towards? Was it towards that vision, or was it just doing what we normally do? So that's how I think how it manifests from these really cool words and our ideals to what you're talking about of actually transforming and allowing grit to happen for every one of our kids. And it's not just, it doesn't matter where you're at on the academic spectrum. If you're one of our most gifted kids and they're really rocking it, I want that kid to struggle. I want that kid to fail at times. I want that kid to have challenges just as much as I want somebody who's really struggling with the early literacy and in a really supportive manner. But that's what this work does for us, I think.
So, and if I can kind of echo on that, this grit component and failure, I think the big pieces that I feel like have been missing just having kids going through the system right now is the responsibility and accountability. And I think you get there by putting challenges in their way, whether it's, academic, being on time, it could be anything to anybody. But if we, learn from those, hold kids accountable, learn from them, I think that's the biggest one way to make great responsible citizens, because they be able to appreciate the smaller things. And I learned so much more from my failures than I ever did any success I have. And if we keep the bar so low that everybody succeeds, we're not helping anybody. And I get sort of concerned that sometimes we're focusing so much on getting everybody to the table that we feel like we've got to keep it at a level where everyone will succeed the same to keep it fair. And I don't think that needs to be the case or the consequence. And so I'd like to see us play somewhere with a range of making opportunities available so that we can hold individuals to their, keep them responsible as we're able to. One of the neat things, I mean, just as a story, the only neat thing maybe to come out of this homeschooling situation is now my kids are so much more responsible for having to do their assignments during the day, tell us what they did. But, a year ago we were coming home and it was, do you have any homework? No, I'm just going to go play. So having this things that they need to be accountable for is helping them. They can tell me their schedules now. And so it's been a bit of a mind flip. And I realize that in particular is not accessible for everybody, but working in that kind of frame where how do we push those, push everybody to be their individual best in some ways and hold them accountable and let them fail and be a safe place for them to fail and help them correct it and be proud then of their next accomplishment. I think that makes very good citizens and helps them want to strive and succeed.
Love the conversation. All right, let's go down to resilient. What are those ideas, themes that really come to mind as you think about this? And again, as Diana just reminded me via text, she's like, it's okay to repeat some pieces that if you've seen it earlier, if there's something that still again makes sense in this resilient section, it's okay to go back to that concept, that theme, that story.
Well, I think resilience really, I mean, we've been talking about that. That's what grit is, right? It's regardless of what your background is, it is that ability to persevere and do the hard work in the face of failure, maybe many times. And I think we all grow when we have failures. And I think Julie made reference to that sometimes you have your greatest growth when you're faced with a failure that you have to do it another way, or you have to somehow get over that obstacle. So I see as our work with equity and academic excellence, resilience is a component of that. And I know resilient is different than resilience, but I don't think us lowering the bar is what we're talking about when we're talking about equity and academic excellence, but that we're raising that bar and expecting all to go there with a distribution of resources in an equitable fashion. So again, I think equity in our district, it just goes back to our values. Equities will allow us to be resilient, to be able to serve those students with all these obstacles in their way. And maybe they have many obstacles, but regardless of what happens in the future in terms of technology, politics, culture, that we are helping those who are furthest from educational justice, as we put during COVID, and coming to their aid first, and then helping and raising up, continuing and helping people to reach those high goals so that we can have scholars across the board, not kids that feel like, well, I tried, but I couldn't overcome it. Or I kept trying, but I didn't have the resources that I needed. Or I didn't have someone to support me. Or my teacher was the only one supporting me. So I think equity is a big piece of our ability to have a resilient message, that we are embracing equity moving forward. So I think equity is timeless for our district right now. So
I think building on equity, how do we continue to support those kids that are at the top? It's not just your students that are struggling, that have those challenges. We can't lose focus of your high cap students or your kids that, are moving at a faster pace. And I think, equity and resiliency have a lot, and inclusive, they all tie in. We were just talking about grit. And so just to share a little bit of my personal experience as a high schooler, middle school, high schooler, I went through the WSD testing when I was in school. Some of you guys, Laura kind of smiled there.
Sorry.
But like my experience was that I never met standard on the WSD. And for me to look at that as a person, I mean, yeah, it was crummy because, remedial courses, whatever it was, pull out at the time, but it didn't define who I was. Like Paul mentioned, they don't fit into this or not, they're not meeting the standard. So just to categorize it, it's just, I don't know. I just, I'm an example of somebody that never met state standards, probably didn't meet district standards. And I took that, I guess I never made it seem like, oh my gosh, that, I'm never going to go anywhere here. And hard work. Yeah, I wasn't your perfect student. I was your C student. But that, again, that didn't make me who I was. And it was a challenge for me to, further my education and not do the housekeeping work that my mother was doing. This is great. How do we take those challenges? This is where the resiliency comes in. Here, I think one of the things that just from conversations with my spouse is that, he tries to approach students, wow, what's going on? Why are you failing this class? And it's like, well, I just, if I don't graduate from high school, I'm just going to go work in the orchards. So how do we flip that around, show them their own potential and make resilient students so that those mishaps, not meeting the standards, failing a course here and there, how do we turn them into opportunities rather than focusing on, oh, they don't fit within this, standard.
Yeah, I want to echo on that too, because I have a funny story. But I agree. If we're teaching to a test or to a particular grade in some ways, then we're kind of done. But if we can try and teach multiple ways or give multiple ways to get there, I think if our model is it's more important that the student is trying different means to get there, maybe they aren't acing every test, but they're putting in the work. Let's give them more work so that they don't just look at their end grade and go, God, I'm a horrible student, I'm just going to go work in the orchard, when really they've got the work ethic and there's other ways to do it if we just worked with them on it. Now I know that's an individual lift for maybe some teachers, but I had to chuckle a little at Maria's story because I was a horrible test taker. My LSATs, my ACTs, my everything were just in the garbage. I was a homework kid. And so I was a straight A homework kid. I could do all the homework. I'd get my C on the test, but my homework average was fine. When I got to college and the grades were more test-based, then yeah, I wasn't getting the grades. But I ultimately kept pushing because I knew my work ethic and that I could learn the stuff. I just knew I wasn't a short-term learner that could learn it for the test. And so it was ironic that I took am in a profession where my entry into it was decided by a test. But by the time I had worked up through every problem, I learned how to take the test. I finally felt so prepared for it. It was just, I had that example where your friend is talking to you after the test and you're like, ooh, you missed that question. That was the constitutional law question, not a contracts question. But anyway, but it was, I'm not hearing anyone suggesting that, and it's maybe too detailed now, that we're not focusing on teaching to a test or whatever, but I sympathize with that. And I think we can build responsibility, accountability, this grit, determination, so that you don't just think, well, I'm just going to go back this path. If we're open to, I guess, making material there, but trying to figure out how best to work in it for the students, if that makes any sense.
So that was a funny little story. You made me think of the word humility, that, you know, along with our growth mindset and our adaptability to change, you know, and respect of differences, that humility is a quality that sort of needs to fit in there, because when we talk about high and low achievers, and did not we see a video together where there were the high cap kids that were talking about how they felt like failures when they became challenged, because they had always been, you know, the smartest kids in the class and things came so easily to them, and their self-esteem really suffered when they actually had to work for, you know, what they wanted to achieve. I was really struck by that. And I thought about the imbalance of opportunity to learn from successes and failures, that the kids at the lower end of our academic spectrum have an abundance of opportunity to learn from failures. And maybe our kiddos at our higher achieving academic, you know, spectrum don't have that same ability or the same number of opportunities to learn from failure. So whoever said, you know, challenging the kids at the higher end of the spectrum was super important. I think that we need to have, you know, structured and systemic balance for those opportunities, and that we're honoring differences. It's okay to fail a test, like, okay, it's not the end of, and kids need to understand that. And there was one more thing, and we need to create a safe place for those failures to occur. And there was another piece, and I forgot what it was, but that's okay. It's enough.
I have something from my experience that I think is alien, but just might be the germ of an idea. Throughout high school, we had 2 grades. You got an achievement grade and you got an effort grade. And it's a kind of weird high school I went to. You went from alpha to gamma. So I got occasionally an alpha gamma, effort coming second, and people could get a gamma alpha. And I think the effort part obviously is pretty subjective and probably totally inapplicable, but the thought of rewarding and recognizing those 2 differences in grades just might fit in to reinforce something somewhere. And it was certainly effective. The students paid attention to it.
I remembered the thing. The thing was coming back from when we were beginning to discuss, before many of you were on the board, the idea of allowing students to represent their learning in ways other than test scores. And we were allowing the collection of evidence or another demonstration of their learning. But this is a depiction of how our students at the lower end of the spectrum are given more opportunities to fail. It was built into that system that in order for the kids to be eligible to prove that they learned it in a way other than taking a test, was they had to fail 3 times in a row. And it used to infuriate me, because it's an inequitable opportunity to have to experience failure in order to achieve success. You shouldn't have to fail. We shouldn't build a system where you're required to fail something 3 times before you can demonstrate success. Balance of success and failures, okay, but let's not create a system where it's a requirement that you must fail multiple times.
Well said. All right, this last piece, this idealistic, this big, bold, and ultimately unachievable, kind of this, where are we going? And there's a lot of work to do. And again, maybe it's already captured in here.
Well, idealistically, I think I personally would love to have 100% of our students graduating. And that includes not having to drop out of school, obviously. Is that realistic? It's maybe not, but I think it's big and bold. And I think still in this day and age, a high school diploma means something. And in order for them to be able to go on to their future dreams, whether it's higher education or an apprenticeship or whatever path they want to go down, a high school diploma is still pretty essential. So I know that's a very finite descriptor, but I want all of our students to be able to have the promise of a future, that they can choose a path and they're not held back because they didn't achieve a high school diploma. So so what does that mean? Does that mean flexibility? I mean, I know we have waivers for students in terms of high school credits and things like that, but just recognizing that a high school diploma is kind of a gateway for a lot of students who don't have the financial means to do many options, including higher education. A high school diploma pretty much stops you in your tracks if you don't have it. So, so yeah, I guess ideally I would like to see something like that so that they have the promise of a future, whether it's a high school diploma, a GED, acceptance into one of whatever their 5th year plan is, whether it's an apprenticeship or the military or whatever, that they have a future that is guaranteed. At least it's presumptively guaranteed, I guess, that they're walking out the doors of our high schools into something else. They're not waiting and wondering if what's going to come along. So something like that, I guess, from me.
I like that. Promise of a future. That's pretty optimistic.
And not only, you know, to add a little bit more to that high school degree diploma, you know, that I know we've touched this with Dr. Stacy Baines. You know, we want every student to, you know, be able to read at, you know, their grade level math, graduate with the ability to, you know, to read, to write, to do, you know, complex math. I think that's really important. And I think this is something that, that we see here locally, you know, at the college. It's like, well, yes, kids are coming in with high school diplomas. However, you know, we're not quite there in regards to college level math or reading. So, you know, the high standards, I'm probably contradicting myself here with my personal experience, you know, but I was that student taking Math 97, you know, was probably what, 93, 97 before I got to 100 level math. So, you know, let's get there so that added challenge or barrier, as you know, is not there. Let's take that away in our K-12 system, so that that's just not another barrier for our students entering their you know, whatever it is that they choose, whether it's military, 4-year, 2-year technical programs.
And just to add on to that, Maria, thanks for bringing that up about remedial classes. We also know data that when students have to take remedial courses after college, that it prolongs their the length of their classwork, and which accrues obviously more dollars to be spent, and their success rate in completing whatever journey they're doing, whether it's 2 years or 4 years or a certificated program, that success rate goes down. So, so I agree. I think having students being able to not need remedial if they're going on for higher education is a critical piece of that. So it doesn't set them backwards.
So for me, in the ideal world, every kindergartner would come to school ready to learn, that they would have the basic skills in order to be successful. Because what we know is that when kindergartners come not ready and, you know, already what we call behind, and that they don't catch up, that they're much less likely to graduate on time from high school, that they're much less likely to earn a good living in their lifetimes and as compared to other students. So in my ideal world, we'd live in a community where every child knew whatever the 6 things were that they needed to know to count to 100 or say their ABCs or spell their name or manipulate scissors and pens and pencils and crayons and interact socially. And yeah.
Love it. Other ideals?
I think I have a comment as well. I would echo what Laura is saying about if you're going to have an absolute ideal, early education would be the first place I would look at, because that's something that the school district can budget for and do. It's a little more difficult to actually say that you will graduate everybody fully competent. Yes, it's, I agree with big, bold, and ultimately unachievable, but be a little careful that you don't create a quantitative goal that's mathematically impossible and everybody knows it. And that was done by the federal government not too long ago. And so I think we would need to thread the needle with those kind of really aggressive, everything should be achievable, but we don't know whether we're going to get there.
Good. Your comment. Any other pieces that you feel like have not been put on the table?
Did we talk about the service oriented?
I was just looking at that.
I skipped one. Sorry. Service oriented.
Well, I'll just put out there that I think even though we're a public school, I think there are a number of ways that our students are exposed to being service oriented through different organizations, particularly at the, you know, the high school level and the middle school level. But even at the elementary level, you know, we have Make a Difference Day. I'm a veteran, and when I've gone for Veterans Day, I receive, you know, not only do they have an assembly, but they do little write-ups with coloring and everything, and they give it to the veterans, and it's always really touching to me. So even our youngest students have exposure to being service-oriented, and I think that that piece, even though as a public school, I don't see that as our primary role, I do think it is a piece, again, as a citizen, that makes you appreciate people who are serving in the community in their various roles that maybe don't get a lot of glory. So anyway, I do think that is still a piece, and we have, I think, our volunteers in the community they are obviously service oriented when they come and help us, because they're doing it out of the goodness of their heart. They're not getting paid. And, so I think having our schools recognize that being service oriented is still important, although it's not, a big, huge piece, but I think it helps us function as a district, and it helps develop our students into future citizens.
I wasn't sure how literal this one is. Are we trying to make students more service oriented, or are we, the board, providing, focusing our effort to our?
I saw it more like that.
Yeah, it's really about making sure that it's not about us, that it's about those who we serve, all those that we serve.
I see it more as a customer service perspective, which I actually have noticed over time is sort of missing in our district in some places in a bigger ways than others. I'm sorry if you were saying more, Julie, but your picture froze. So if you were still talking, we couldn't see that you were still talking. I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I see that customer service orientation on multiple levels. One is we're providing a service. We as staff have a servant's heart towards our children, our students. And I sometimes see students treated as something other than that, something that some people that need to be pushed, encouraged, admonished, blah, 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 blah. When I often think that we could do better if we were thinking of our students as clients of our district, our families as clients of our district. And when they express an opinion about something that we aren't doing, are we taking that to heart? Are we making sure that that's not a single episode, that it's not something pervasive, that we, in our customer service obligation to our outcome, ought to be addressing? We should be of service to our community to create good citizens, but we also have a customer service obligation to our economy. Are we producing citizens that are able to contribute economically to themselves, to their families, to their communities, and to society as a whole? And that one being the last one is we have a customer service obligation to our society to produce students who are all the things we talked about earlier: critical thinkers, adaptive to change, blah, 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 blah. That's what service oriented meant to me.
Others on the topic?
Yeah, I think I might add one thing. Given what Laura said, it may not be that relevant, but I think it's true. A contributing organization is also a beneficiary of that organization's service. If you're talking about people, I think mutual benefit is universal. It's the economist talking to me about me, but it's a subtle situation. But a school district that's really servicing the community, the students, and everything else, every time you do a good job of service, you get something back. It strengthens you, the organization. You often will actually get some resources back that you didn't actually ask for. I'm not sure. I think that's probably too fine, but that's an aspect of it. Just saying that they're contributors and beneficiaries, I think the contributors are always beneficiaries as well.
Any other comments?
Just when I first read this, the beneficiaries here to me were the students, and mainly the students and the parents. The other part would be us, administrators, teachers. And I think this is where, this is where big impact is being made and can be made. the customer service that we are providing to our customers here, just thinking about our students, the way we treat them, the way it's going to have the input, you're going to see the output based on the input, of our customer service. And, we talk a lot about stories, how are we learning from these stories, and what are we doing in regards to the service we're providing? And whether it be in a classroom, in a building office. So yeah.
Good.
Yep.
Ultimately, it's about our kids, our families, our staff, and how do we bring guidance, support, a vision to our district that moves us forward and doing better for all. Well, you all nailed it today. You did a great job. I love the conversation. I love the conversation between the board members, and really pushing the thinking, pushing on different topics, different words, to get clarity. It was fantastic. So Diana, Kim, and I will do is take this work, organize it, and then bring it back to the board. I'm looking at that first week in October, that Monday, October 5th, or Tuesday, October 6th, to keep us moving down our timeline. And what we would do is bring you back just a structure of what we heard today and making sure we're good there, and then starting to move on some different pieces. And from there, if once the board is good with the structure we've created, and you guys move it around a little bit, we'll start then engaging another group of stakeholders with your work as you start going down a road, doing some different components of the strategic plan. So it is either October 5th or 6th from 1 to 3 work.
Either works for me.
Cool.
And what time would that be?
1 to 3.
Yep, I'm fine both days.
Yeah.
Works for me.
Was that Tuesday, October 6th?
Correct.
Okay.
Or Monday.
Or yeah, the 5th or the 6th.
Either one would work.
Yeah, both are fine with me.
Yep, either one works for me too.
All right. Just to keep us moving on our train, and not to forget from the day, I don't want to go too many weeks out, but it'll give us some time to organize all of these thoughts.
So do you want to pick a day? Because the sooner we nail it down, the better, because
Yep.
schedules
Let's
fill
go
up.
let's go the 6th from 1 to 3, and we'll put it on your calendars.
Okay. Super.
All right, team, back to you, Laura.
All right. Thanks, everybody, for contributing to this important meeting today. I really enjoyed hearing from all of you, and looking forward to the next step. So we are next together tomorrow.
Yeah.
We have executive sessions starting at 5 and followed up with our regular board meeting at 6. So see everybody then.
Bye, everybody. Nice job.
Bye.
Bye.
Oops.